What's interesting, I think at its heart, what makes you a successful marketer, entrepreneur, leader, business owner, I think some of those things are core. They're the same. You're going to be, intellectual curiosity. You're going to be smart, but you're always looking. You're going to be willing to test and try and explore and play. Those are things that are going to serve you well, being diligent and being committed. But when you start to take that break that we all kind of go through, do I want to go out on my own? There's a space that I think you lean in on even more, which is your...
What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another powerful episode of Marketing by Design. I'm your host, Andy Milligan of MMG Design, and today we have on a very special guest, and it is the one and only Bennie Johnson. Bennie Johnson is the president of the American Marketing Association, and yes, that title speaks for itself. Bennie is a lifelong marketer, entrepreneur, and business leader. In this conversation, you and I are going to learn the biggest lessons that Bennie has learned organizing and marketing organization of nearly 500,000 people worldwide, why you should always check your spam folders, how to get ahead in a competitive market, and much, much more. And if you stick around until the very end, Bennie is going to tell you the one single trait that he sees in all successful founders, entrepreneurs, and marketers in his network. Special thank you to Bennie Johnson for coming on the show today. This is a milestone episode for our chapter, and it's such a pleasure to interview the one and only. All the links to the AMA and our presenting sponsors will be in the show notes below. Be sure to check everything out. Without further ado, please welcome Bennie Johnson.
That's a great way. How do we start, right? Like, the superhero narrative, the backstory, right? The origin story. So
Right.
I think the way I always think about the world today, for me, is kind of surreal. I'm the marketing kid who grew up loving marketing, who got a chance to work in marketing, who now gets to lead the marketing organization. So kind of thinking of those layers and spaces that come into it, that's what kind of brought me in. It's what drew me into the role. I tell people all the time, always check your spam filter, because I was going around living my best life, I thought, and checked my spam filter one weekend, and I had a note from the recruiter that said, AMA CEO role, call now. And kind of being in there and answering that really gave me an opportunity, as I mentioned, having grown up being someone who kind of navigated the world through marketing, entrepreneurship, whatever job I had, always kind of pulled those in together, having the opportunity to serve as a chief marketing officer and strategy officer for multiple organizations, and then getting the call to come in at a really powerful inflection point to be the new leader of the American Marketing Association. So that's kind of what brings me here and brings me to the table. This is one of those jobs that I take everything that I've done before, and it kind of, you get a chance to manifest it here.
Mm-hmm. All right. No, that's awesome. I think the biggest thing that struck me about the AMA, when we first joined, was just the diversity. So you have these freelancers, you have these professional people in organizations, and they bring all of these to the events, to the partnerships, and even getting more into the national scene, you start to see even more of that. You see agency owners, you see people that have either freelanced for a period of time who now bring their experiences to the professional organization. What do you see particularly in marketers that indicates a certain aptitude for going freelance or really thriving in a professional organization? First of all, I think the AMA is a good place to kind of find that out, stress test, ask people who have experienced both. But what are the key indicators that you see that maybe indicate someone's cut out to build their own thing versus thrive in a more professional setting? Hey guys, this is Andy. It's just super quick. I want to tell you all about the latest tool I'm developing for our agency at MMG, and it is the highest converting website homepages visual swipe file we're putting together in Notion. If you're a marketer or a founder and you're looking for some more inspiration, I've actually compiled a visual swipe file that I use every time we go into the wireframing stage and start to apply branding with all of the highest converting websites of all different industries. These are organized by visual colors, call to action, industry, and value prop. You can tab through all of these collections of homepages very simply and begin to visualize how your own company and brand can start to apply to these same principles. That'll be in the first link below.
What's interesting, I think at its heart, what makes you a successful marketer, entrepreneur, leader, business owner? I think some of those things are core. They're the same. You're going to be, intellectual curiosity. You're going to be smart, but you're always looking. You're going to be willing to test and try and explore and play. Those are things that are going to serve you well, being diligent and being committed. But when you start to take that break that we all kind of go through, do I want to go out on my own? There's a space that I think you lean in on even more, which is your ability to be resilient, to be kind of gritty in that, to kind of push through, your ability to be open to the process of learning and exploring, and the kind of core optimism and belief that you can make things better. Like those are some of the things that serve you well, because at the end of the day, when you're thinking about starting your own marketing practice or you're working someplace in there, you're never really questioning whether you know how to market, right? That's kind of the
Right.
given in many ways, right? You've got that core skill. You know how to market. This becomes that kind of application. How do you thrive? How do you explore? How do you expand in the situation in there? And I know sometimes, based on where you may be in life or journey, an entrepreneurial space may seem more risky. The reality is there's risk in both sides, right? And kind
Right.
of understanding your level and temperature for risk aversion is something that, you have to kind of build within yourself. I love when I see people come out and start to take the entrepreneurial journey where they start to take those steps and test. And then eventually you get to a spot where you just have to leap, right? You
Right.
you can't be timid about it. You have to kind of go in and bet on yourself, right? Now, the interesting thing is that's the advice I would give if you're starting your own business. But the reverse side of that is that advice still holds true if you're running an existing enterprise.
Right.
Having resilience, having creative, ingenuity, being intellectually curious, being committed to people and leading and betting on yourself, right?
Yeah, and that's something that isn't talked about a lot, I feel like, because there's this general perception that you're cut out for one or the other. And I think just like having these conversations with people that are in different niches that are
Right.
have done both, none of them, there's not often where they feel like they thrive in one or the other. So there's so much in common with both. And also just kind of getting over the misperceptions of having to figure it out so early. Because I know
Right.
a lot of the younger people in marketing, like maybe they go to a university,
Right.
they get a general marketing degree, and they have these internships and they have like these other experiences they're kind of drawing from. But I think part of it is just accepting the reality that it takes the work, it takes the dedication, and also just
Right.
the time to maybe fail a little bit,
Right.
definitely fail a
Right.
little bit, and get exposed to hopefully these people, whether it's in the AMA, whether it's in other orgs that can kind of fast track that learning process a little bit. Because
Right.
we're all on this journey of like self discovery, right?
Right.
And if I even like think about myself, like I started, doing something totally different. I was a personal trainer,
Hmm.
strength conditioning coach, played college golf, and a little bit about my background is that I got into this internship. It was called the Oiler 10 at the University of Fenway,
Okay.
and we used to volunteer our time. We meet at 5:30 on Wednesday mornings as a marketing team, as to kind of like weed out the people that didn't take it seriously, and we would volunteer like for local businesses in exchange for donations to the University of Fenway.
Mm.
We were called the
Hmm.
Oiler 10. So
Right.
I was kind of the designer and marketer in the group, and we got to do a brand identity and marketing kickoff for a local brewery, and that's what just got me enamored in
Right.
the organizations of marketing, getting into the industry as a whole. I took several internships before I went off and founded my own company to do it full time. But I think that inflection point right there, where I see so
Right.
many kind of the
Right.
younger people, and that's why the AMA does such a good job at like rooting in universities and organizations. You catch people with that snap of curiosity,
Right.
in any niche of marketing, whether it be social media, paid ad strategy, like all these different
Right.
things they can kind of pick and choose from. They identify with that thing and they thrive in it. So
Right.
what I'd love to give you a platform to kind of talk about the AMA in university settings, catching us at a younger age, and what that can really do in terms of being the gas on the fire for finding the thing that you're fueled up and passionate about.
It can be in a word like life changing, right?
Yeah.
And game
Oh
changing
yeah.
in these moments. that, one of the things important to know is being comfortable with the fact that we don't know anything, right? And that's
Right.
kind of,
Yeah.
it's hard when you're a student, you come in and your stance is supposed to be learning, but we always come into this like, we're learning, but we want to feel like we already know enough to be successful.
Right.
But the reality, if you're truly open to learning, you have no idea. And you end up with these moments where there may be points, passions, interests, or unexpected turns that kind of open up. And college is that space that gives us permission to do that broadly. I'm a believer that marketing always gives you that permission throughout the course of your career. But when you're starting off at college, having the space to have peers and projects and spaces where, in some respects, it's low risk. Like you did the first volunteer space, it was giving of yourself, and you could go and burn and learn and build a confidence that gives you enough to say, okay, I know how to do these two things. Well, let me add two other items. Well, let me learn this other experience. Let me stop back. And before you know it, you've got a network set of 10 to 30 different experiences you've had, right? And you realize you have this moment that there's something here. It's something, whether it's the connection, the story building, the branding, the strategy, there are component parts there that kind of work together and get you excited about being in marketing. And I think of it as kind of this match point, right? It's this inflection and ignition point where people come in. You never hear anybody just kind of, well, I just kind of ended up doing marketing, right? There's always, it captured me on my journey. I was
Yeah.
doing something else that caught my attention. I threw in here and I did what no one else could do. And it kind of pushed me forward in there. There's a group of us, we had a project. I was the one who knew how to put things together, right? And next thing you know, you realize that that passion creates a future path.
Yeah.
College is a great way, and AMA in particular, from the programming, the service opportunities, the learning, the mentorship, and the general camaraderie, right? It's a space in a professional association where you can meet with people who are at the same space where you are, where you're all figuring out together, which may be your next business partner, right? Which
Yeah.
may be your next advisor, which may be the next partner when you go into other jobs in there. You're then meeting students that are coming younger than you who, whereas you may still be figuring it out, you're a semester ahead of them in figuring it out, right? And kind of moving forward. And then the kind of integrated space. As the American Marketing Association, we cover the entire community of marketing. So whether you're a 17-year-old, freshman thinking about marketing, or you're CMO of a major enterprise, or you're starting a small agency, or you're working for the first time in digital ads, there's a space for you in the AMA. There's a network, there's a community, there are resources that help you along the way. I love when I talk to folks and they're like, yeah, they've been a part of AMA for 15 years, but what they got on year 1 and 2 is different than what they year 15. I was talking to a long-serving volunteer leader, and he's now running his own successful agency. That wasn't him 20 years ago when he started, but AMA has been able to been an engagement point for him along the way at all the different spaces. First promotion, last promotion, new techniques, new clients, taking that bold jump from the standard 9 to 5, if you will, jump into your own enterprise. Having
Right.
AMA as this kind of support and accelerant, man, is priceless.
Yeah. And that's one of the biggest things I've seen too is that and you see this with a lot of professional orgs, and I would say the AMA is kind of differentiated in this fact, is that when you think of a professional organization, you think of it appealing to people that are in professional jobs, right? Whereas, like, with the biggest thing at the AMA, I went to my first event, and more than half of us are freelancers, whether it's marketers, designers.
Right.
That was where I was able to just ask so many questions and really immerse myself in the community of
Right.
talking about the things that, you can't talk inside baseball with
Right.
anyone else.
Right.
Things like pricing, client relationships,
Yep.
that was the biggest value in it for me. So when you go to these conferences and these keynotes and you see there's like a ton of people at these things, man, and you're going to all these different areas, meeting all these people. When you speak at these events in front of these marketers, whether they are freelancers or whether they are more in professional orgs, what are some of the things that you leave with? Do you leave I'm sure you leave very inspired and
Right.
ready to continue the mission.
Yeah.
But what are some specific things that you leave with after being energized in a room of like-minded people like that?
Well, I leave with these 3 areas in there. A firm respect for the commitment, right? The commitment to running your enterprise, a commitment to building a business in your community and economy in there, that's without exception. You leave with that. You leave inspired by the creativity and the notion of innovation, right? Believing that you can make something that's not there is really powerful, right? So committed to the work, then a commitment to the growth and innovation and idea. And what I've always taken away from the AMA events is this enduring sense of community in really dynamic ways, right? You have a space where you can ask all the questions that you know you have, but you don't feel like it's a space to, whether it's as simple as pricing and contracts, which is easy to say as simple as pricing and contracts, but when you know you're doing the work, you know what's the hardest thing to come up with? Pricing and contracts, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And having someone to talk to you about that, or sharing the acceleration points, the pitfalls, the kind of validation of the feelings and the moments in there. How do you leave a client, right? When you're
Right.
starting a business, you never think about firing your own clients, right? It's one of the most critical things that a emerging business can do. There are times where there are clients that you need to evolve. And like you would never think about that as an opening question, right? But that's something that's important to have. Then seeing a way in which how your work can be reflected in those around you. You're not an industry by yourself, right? So when you think about this, when you're doing a freelance space or you're a solopreneur or you're a small scale individual contractor or studio, there are times in which the work requires you to be the Avengers. And a space like the AMA allows you to have those corresponding superpower skills to augment what you're doing. I've met many business owners who started off just like that. They were working on one part of a strategic comms area. They met somebody else who had branding. There was a need for the client to have the two. Next thing you know, they're working together, and then two is better than one. More is better than less, right? And you start to move in that direction. You go into a content and someone needs social strategy and you're coming from your AMA experience and going, wow, I'm decent at social, but you know who's really killing it? Andy's really killing it social. Let's bring him into the conversation. That's what you get with a professional network, right? A professional community of like-minded folks. They're going to show up for you. They're going to show up for the client in the work.
Amen. Yeah, 100%. And that's, like I said, that's the biggest value I've gotten out of it. And that's why we always bang the drum. We do it every week.
Yeah.
So that's like the one thing that, I was telling Chris, our president, is that when you enamor people with the value off the bat, just like we did, some of our events for job seekers and trying to really meet our audience where they're at, just through the content and so forth, we start to know them better. And as soon as you provide value to people and it really resonates, then it just sticks. And then you just see it, whether it lights up on their face. They engage online, on platform, off platform, especially when you go to some of these events and you meet new people. Something I would really, value your input on is if you could kind of, when I do these interviews, like I'm not the best interviewer, but I really try and mix the tactical with like the philosophical, right? So if you could like attribute, a lot of our audience has seen kind of you and a lot of the AMA leaders from afar. If you could kind of attribute your like career success, your ability to build a network and connect with people, if you could attribute that down to maybe like a daily habit or just one trait about yourself, what do you think that would be if you could put words to it?
Oh my goodness. So, if you think about it, it's a great question. Probably a combination of things that kind of work in the positive direction in your favor. So I'm always telling myself and my teams that each day we're going to get incrementally better, right? So it's a quest of, you don't have to do it all, but you have to do something, right? That we're going to grow and get incrementally better. Two, we're going to make sure that we continue to grow and innovate. We're going to challenge the things around us. We're going to challenge what we do. And that can be stressful at times because it's uncomfortable, right? To challenge things that go into it. I've told my teams before that if we're working on a project and everybody gets it and it seems perfect, then we're probably not working hard enough, right?
Right.
We're not breaking through if everybody understands exactly how there's no hesitation of, why are you doing this? And I think when it comes to building community, it's the question that, I tell people all the time, I'm greedy when it comes around being with smart, driven, dynamic people. I like to be around folks in there, and I like to encourage that. in spaces. So building community, sometimes you just need someone to tell you it's all right to think differently, right? It's encouraged to think differently. We're setting a bar to encourage you to think differently. Marketers come to that table honestly, but the rest of our world doesn't always embrace that. So having a community in which you can nod and say, yes, Andy, thinking a bit differently is important, is valuable, does deliver. So I think that's important in there. Things that I will always do, I know everybody's not a morning person, but I get up earlier than probably everybody else and start working faster. That's always been helpful to me. I remember early in my career, I had marketing jobs in the entertainment industry, and that was bizarre, but pushed me forward because I was up every morning when everybody else was out doing the events and still up late at night. I still had to be back in and do the other systems, logistics, marketing strategy parts of the work at 7 and 8 in the morning. And being able to be that. So I wasn't waiting until noon to come in and start working to build a strategy, and it allowed us to elevate. And so that created a kind of a commitment to that work ethic in the space. And then the next thing that I think about in that is I always try to approach our relationships, our conversations, the work we do with an openness of this could lead to the unexpected, right? So that allows you to not put interactions or engagements into limited boxes or ideas. Well, I'm meeting with this group, so I know it's only going to be X. There's no better way to kind of limit the potential, the outcome, the beauty of stuff if you automatically limit it. Andy does X, so my meeting can't be about Y. Like, no, that's when some of those breakthroughs come in. Because if you think about it, if we started back at your biography and we only talked about you as a golfer, we wouldn't be talking about you as a marketer.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
You do, and that's one of the things I've taken away from some of your interviews and content. I feel like you have I'm very conscious of saying natural ability because, that's like, it's not giving you credit, but your ability to kind of connect and resonate with people, I think you do a good job of using people's names, remembering small quotes and anecdotes. The one thing that stuck out to me as I was, preparing a little bit was how you take time to prepare, like before interviews, so you always set aside 5 minutes. And then the difference, and that's just low-hanging fruit to me. Like you'd be astounded by the difference between a small tactic like that, like just 5 minutes can prepare you to make connection that can make all the difference.
But to your point, it's a strategic and philosophical way of life, right? So then if you do it all the time, it becomes less of an action or a tactic, more of a habit. And if you do it all the time, a habit, it becomes a way of approaching the world in there. So taking that moment to reflect, taking that space in there, and that was advice that was given to me from a late mentor who said it, and he said it in jest, but it was so powerful because you think about it, and all these things we do in life, you go into it, you take a moment to go, okay, what are we doing again? Just that moment in your personal life. Like, so what are we doing again, right? Just centering and focusing there provides just that level of preparation that your peers, your colleagues, your friends, your family, your team members may not have done, right? But it's also a respect for the matter at hand. It's respect for your time and skill and space in there. You want to position yourself where you can deliver the best of you in the situation, right? And I think that's when we think about getting better every day. We think about the authenticity and kind of engaging. People know when you show up if you're a good team member. Win, lose, or draw, you being a good team member, doesn't change that fact, but it does change the reality, right? You can have some of your best team members and you are sucking it up and losing every day. But it's that, how are you working together that's going to help you work through? You look back, you see any championship team, of course they remember all the wins, but you know what they remember? When they start to turn it around, when they were just a hair away from winning, right? Just right there on the line and losing together.
Yeah. Kind of branching off on that, on the context of winning, what is the future of the AMA look like? What do you have your feelers out for? What's on the radar to come up? And honestly, Bennie, like, what has you most excited to get up and innovate, for the organization? Because I know when you step into a role like this, it's a lot of big picture thinking. It's a lot of having to communicate I would imagine, slower moving initiatives.
Yep.
So what are some of the things that are maybe shorter term that you're excited coming up for, whether this year or in, this coming foreseeable future that, get you excited to get out of bed in the morning?
Well, I will tell you this, coming into the AMA, I was drawn in by the power and purity and direction of our basic mission that has been around forever to be the essential community for marketing. And I will tell you this, because we're in Columbus, so we're right in the midst of one of my favorite institutions. So I'm going to take a pivot off of your trademark. And we started off by our mission said to be an essential community, right? And there's something noble about that, and that kind of gets you in the space. But that's not winning a championship. Winning the championship is shifting that article around. And so shifting that article around for us has been about being the essential community. So my nod to my Ohio State folks in there, right?
Yeah.
There's power in being the, and that's what gets me excited, kind of tripling down on that. And being the marketing, the essential community for marketers allows us to ebb and flow as your career journey changes, as your needs evolve, as your organizations and team evolve, as our marketplace evolves. This is an incredible time to be in terms of marketing. We are often comparing us to like the solar system. We're everly expanding, right? That's what makes marketing fun and dynamic. I look at the skills that were needed for a chief marketing officer 20 years ago, nowhere near the skills needed today, right?
Right.
You think about brand, technology, ethical practice, infrastructure, the way you work with other parts of the business, the platforms and the communication norms that didn't exist 10 years ago. How do we navigate that to build a future that we are only just imagining? That gets me excited. And like, what can I do? I know that we need to create a space that encourages curiosity and learning. I know we need to create a space that empowers and educates marketers. I know we need to create a safe space that allows this dynamic interchange. And for me, all those things are what represent community. And we say networking really quickly, but sometimes we say networking all the time. People get a 1980s view of that and think we're in a room passing out business cards. They don't get the sense that community is really the contemporary expression. It's showing up and giving and contributing and receiving all at the same time. It's what do we do? How do we celebrate our wins, draws, and losses? How do we learn from them? How do we bring each other together? How do we disrupt, break new things in? How do we build on established principles? How do we make the best of a profession that evolves and brings the best out of us? And so that's what I get excited about every day. I get to have conversations with young thought leaders like yourself in here. I get to have conversations with CMOs who've got 30 years in the game. I'm talking to deans and new professors who are teaching in different ways, right? Responding. I'm then talking to technologists who are shaping the future of marketing, or creators who may not even refer to themselves as marketers, but when you look at what they're doing, the activity, the audience, the reach, the engagement, marketing, marketing, marketing. How does our profession evolve and grow with all those things in it? As I said, this is an incredible time to be in marketing. It's a disruptive time. So for some, it can be scary. This is the time that you want to have a crew with you. You want to have a professional network.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, like a very practical example kind of what you said is that a lot of people get this impression of networking. This is more speaking towards the founders, people that are doing their own thing, and whether it be in marketing or anywhere else. They get this impression of networking, and they think they can't get value out of people that do the same things from them. Yeah. Whereas that is just the total opposite, because the events where they're more specific and niche toward the events, the leadership groups that are more specifically tailored to your niche, you're going to learn so much more at a place like that than you would try and brand yourself and get yourself out there at such a wide events. Like we joined a bunch of chambers of commerces when I first started the business. We joined very business centered orgs that were more city driven. I think that's the appeal for people as soon as they view themselves as a business. But the amount of value that I personally and other marketing founders in my network have gotten from the AMA and professional organizations, just in terms of knowing what other people are doing, a great source of referral relationships like we talked about, and honestly just knowing like these things that are going to be on your radar soon, because so much of this and what we're doing is changing from day to day. We're all drinking from a fire hose in terms of information and changing, and you're trying to add the most value and grow our own thing. But when we take one step outside of that and go, to an adjacent service industry, that's where I think the home runs happen, is when you meet someone that does something very similar, but has a unique perspective or value prop or business model or experience that can, really level you up, and is a lot of times what I found exactly what I needed. And that's why I have these conversations. And honestly, like I know we're both podcasters, but to me, the podcast is just an excuse to have conversations with cool people that I
Oh my
wouldn't be able to
goodness.
get in touch with otherwise.
It is one of the best things ever, right? I tell people about this. It's one of the most unexpected, incredible joys of the role and the job is being able to have provocative conversations across the board, right? And podcasting gives you an opportunity to have these incredible private conversations in a dynamic public forum,
Hmm.
right? It's really, and for our moment, it's how we kind of tease out what the paths forward are, right? And you notice it said paths plural because for
Hmm.
years it'd been like there's a central location. You've got to pick one thing, do one thing, be that thing, right? That's not the world we're in right now, in which we're going to have multiple realities at the same time. And the work we start off with may evolve as we grow and evolve, and as the opportunity grows and evolve. And we may come back in that. I love seeing people who built up a career within an organization go off and start their own and then come back and then go into teaching, right? So they're doing all those things at the same time. They are both strategist, builder, leader, professor, student, and simultaneously. And I think that makes for the richest, most successful. When you see successful business and marketing people in there, they're typically going to be intellectually curious. They're typically going to be open to new ideas and seeking out conversations in other spaces. And this creates a platform for that.
Yeah, and that's what I think one of the biggest things I've learned too is that people don't tie themselves to one identity, right? So
Right.
these, and I've seen it even in myself, where you want to brand yourself as one specific thing, and there's value in that, 100%. But
Right.
not being like, this is the hill I'll die on. This is the only
Right.
thing I do. I'm never going back to whether it's a professional job or the teaching role or any of these other things. And being in the AMA for me has opened my mind to just the not just the alternatives path, but not everything is cookie cutter, cut and dry. Like there's several mentors I have that they do higher ed education on a part-time basis,
Right.
and it gets them in touch with people that could be leads for their agency just through
Exactly.
that
Right.
organization. So it's like this counterintuitive thing where not everything is, chocolate, not everything is vanilla, but you have these different flavors of,
Yeah.
marketing and career as a whole. It's really just about I think the self-awareness is the word we use a lot on here, and knowing,
Right.
what does a successful career, what does a successful business, what does a successful enterprise, look like for you in marketing. And I think
Right.
one of the main value props of the AMA is that it helps you fast track that experience process and find that for yourself. So one thing I really wanted to ask you, and kind of landing the plane
Yeah.
on this interview because I value your time a lot, but do you still drive a minivan?
Oh my goodness. Asking the question, the secret power, yes. I still rock the minivan, which
Okay.
reluctantly I moved into. I moved into the minivan reluctantly, but now it is the Swiss Army knife of vehicles, man. I do. I rock. I try to give it a little more dad swag to it, but yes,
Uh-huh. Yeah. Do you care to share like what make and model you're rocking?
rocking the Honda Odyssey. And,
Odyssey,
and,
yeah.
and for those who got a chance to watch the blockbuster Daredevil, that Deadpool Wolverine, it has a cameo there. It's actually the
Yeah, it
exact same
does.
color of my Honda Odyssey. Just
Yeah, they knew.
yes,
They're like, man,
they
we gotta
know.
put it in here.
We got to put it
Yeah.
in there. No, no, it's a fun bit of trivia in there that I reluctantly came into, and my wife gets all the credit for picking it in there. But that's so many family memories and so many spaces that roll with that. So, yeah,
Yeah.
you might not think it's cool, but it's all right. I think rocking
Dude,
the dad swag, it's cool with my minivan, man.
dude, my a little bit of inside baseball here. My first car in high school was a Chrysler minivan.
See,
And
look
it
at
was
you.
my grandfather's car. So, I mean, it was a Chrysler, so it was a little bit bougie, but
Yeah,
that's why I wanted to ask you like the make and model year because I
yeah, yeah.
pictured you as like a Volkswagen. I don't know.
No, I,
Maybe
I got
I was
got
off.
got a Honda Odyssey in there.
Yeah.
Just keeping it rolling.
Yeah, that's what we got to do, man. But if you could leave, the audience with one shine. First of all, I want to thank you for your time a ton, Benny, man. Like I said, it's a landmark interview for us. We've been doing the podcast for 18 months, every Tuesday at 6 a.m. And you're someone that I want to thank. I want to thank Ursula a lot for the introduction and getting us in touch.
Yes.
But She's a treasure, by the way, dude.
Yeah.
Like we were straight up, we met online. We were straight up like, can I hug you through the screen type of vibes. But
Yes, Ursula is the best, and we're honored to have her on our team and her leadership and engagement. Hey, I thank you for inviting me, and I'm happy to be a part of it. I'm really proud of what you're doing, and whatever I can do to encourage to continue everybody in Columbus and exploring the new ideas. And as we said before, you get to make marketing what it means for you in the future, and that's awesome.
I appreciate that a lot. But there's one thing you could leave the audience with in terms of AMA, where to find you, all of our resources, where can people find you, and continue a conversation and get in touch with some of their local leaders.
Yeah, when in doubt, start off with ama.org. So the site is a central hub to connect you in there. And we have 75 chapters throughout the US and abroad. We have 350 chapters on student chapters, but we're also a dynamic virtual network. So we can connect just like you and Ursula did via Zoom, via text, via forum. What we are and what we continue to push for is to be the essential community for marketing. So whatever you need to help you get to where you need to go for you, your career, your team, your org, your purpose, we're here for that. Find us out, the AMA. Like I said, everything from AI to templates to best practices and doing your podcast, my friend.
Exactly. Yeah, and the marketing and podcast as well. You guys released the next season on
Yes.
February. Bunch of
Yes, we did.
episodes to binge through. A lot of good content there. So I'd encourage people to check that out as well.
Thank you, my friend. It's a pleasure.